Piensas que gente tan joven y venir a un país a luchar, un país que probablemente a lo mejor, bueno, no probablemente, seguramente no conocían, y venir a luchar por ideales.
Abandonar siendo ellos eran muy jóvenes, ¿no? Abandonar en el país sin saber realmente lo que se iban a encontrar aquí. O sea, es muy fácil decir voy a luchar, pero las condiciones, cómo era todo, pues eran completamente... O sea, no tenían ni idea.
Entonces, pues, pensar que tan jóvenes, venir a un país que no conocían, te coge así un poco, te impresiona. Porque entonces estamos hablando de una época en que viajar, por ejemplo, de Londres a España era toda una odisea.
Alan Williams, who had tried twice unsuccessfully to enter Spain, found himself with a group of volunteers in the French Mediterranean port of Marseille.
One evening we were put on a boat to go to Barcelona. I knew two of the fellas, and also I knew Harry Dobson and a fellow named Alwyn Skinner. I only knew Harry by reputation because he was a ronda boy like myself.
Harry Dobson, the miner from South Wales, had been jailed for 6 months with hard labour for disrupting a black-shirt march in the Ronda Valley. Upon release, he volunteered for Spain.
The ship took off late at night, dark, and sometime in the next day, early in the morning. I was half asleep, actually. There was one hell of a bang, and the ruddy ship lifted out of the water. A torpedo had hit the ship. And it was sinking. It was really going down. And there were 3 or 4 lifeboats on there, and they were launched. Harry and Alwyn and a couple of them were lucky enough to get a lifeboat. I failed. So I jumped in the water myself. Anyway, I hung onto the lifeboat, and after about an hour or so, I've no idea the time, fishing boats came and picked us up and took us back to land. The next time I saw Harry, he was drinking coffee and I was soaking wet. Well, it was another incident. I'd already been bloody buried. What's the difference of being drowned?
In Spain, most of the foreign volunteers joined international brigades, military formations organised principally on the basis of nationality and language. In the British battalion of the 15th International Brigade, there were men from Britain and Ireland, from Australia and New Zealand, South Africa and the Caribbean. The Londoners Sol Frankel and George Wheeler joined the battalion as riflemen.
Of course, we had very few weapons, but what we did have was the Mexicansky rifle.
They were Russian rifles, not as good as an Enfield. They were called Mexicanskis because we were told they were sent to Mexico first, then on to Spain. I picked up my arms training pretty quickly. I was made a sergeant. Eventually, I was sent to an officer's school. That's where Lewis Clive comes in.
Lewis Clive, the Oxford graduate and Olympic champion, was one of 4 Labour Party councillors in the British battalion. He had gained military experience with the Officer Training Corps at Eton, and in Spain became a company commander.
At the officer's school, it was supposed to be a 4-week school. The outstanding thing I remember about him, on target practice, was about 250 yards of target. And we were firing at these targets there. And when we had finished firing there, it says on one target, that was Lewis Clive's target, there was 2 good groupings. One was mine and one was Lewis. I was firing at his target.
The British battalion saw its first major action early in 1937 near Madrid. To this area in the months that followed came Alan Williams and John Dunlop. Williams to serve as first aid man in anti-fascist German and subsequently American battalions, Dunlop with a British artillery unit and later as an infantryman.
And then we were sent off to the front to Jarama, the place where the 15th Brigade had been earlier in the year, where they'd stemmed the fascist advance to cut off the road to Valencia from Madrid.
The next morning, it was quiet in the trench, actually. A couple of bullets whizzing over. I don't know if you heard bullets coming over the trench, have you? They crack. They really crack.
My job was to pick out an enemy machine gun post on the other side. Then we run the guns up, and I direct the fire, and 3 ranging shots, and the rest of the shots went right into the target.
After about 3 days there was a sudden bombardment for some unknown reason on that particular section of the front. There were shells and mortars coming over. And, I was terrified, really terrified. I don't like this. I didn't come here to get killed. I came to kill them.
It had developed into trench warfare there, like in the First World War.
Anyway, the shelling lasted about 10 minutes. And then quiet. There was a cry for sanitario, a Spanish for the first aid man. So I dashed to where the people was, and there was a crowd of Germans, crowd of soldiers sitting round a young fella. He was sitting on the floor of the trench, and they opened up, and he had his arm hanging off. The shrapnel had hit his arm. Oh, God, I thought, what the hell do I do now? First time I'd seen anybody with a war blood. First time I'd seen blood caused by war. Anyway, I rallied myself. My training came to my aid, so I bandaged him up, and he was put on a stretcher. He was shocked, had shock, and sent him back.
I was sent up to the British battalion, and Wally Tapsell was the commissar there.
Wally Tapsell had been working in London as circulation manager for the communist newspaper The Daily Worker. In Spain, he became battalion commissar. The commissar's role in the international brigades was not unlike that of chaplain in a conventional army. A political appointment, the commissar was primarily responsible for the welfare and morale of the men.
Now, we had a bloke called Barney Shields, and he didn't like commissars. Wally Taps had left his boots outside his bedroom door for somebody to polish for him. So anyway, Barney came on duty that night with a skinful, and of course he was in guard when he felt an urgent need to go somewhere and release a lot of fluid, and he couldn't leave his post, but he saw the boots there, so he filled the boots. Wally got a surprise and a wet foot when he came to put his boots on in the morning.
I wanted to see my friend Billy. I'd been in Spain for quite a while now, and I hadn't seen him. So I wanted to know where the British battalion were. So I found out where they were. They were in a place called Mondeja. So I made it my business to go there, and lo and behold, there was Billy. He'd been wounded down in Cordova, but he was all right there. Oh, and he was so pleased to see me, and I was pleased to see him. And he said to me, when he first saw me, he looked at me, he said, Alan, he said, what the hell are you doing here? I said, same as you, Billy. So anyway, talked with Billy. We went to, he knew a photographer in the little village, so we went to have a photograph taken. He said, you'll have this taken, Alan, to remember us when we were here. And I've got that photograph now. 3 days later, back at Brunete, Billy was killed. Shock to me.
The international brigades, the British among them, were a small but significant component of the Republic's armed forces. In successive campaigns and with Soviet aid, the Republic tried to wrest the military initiative away from the nationalists, but denied the right to buy arms and equipment abroad by the non-intervention agreement. Government offensives ended invariably in stalemate and setback. Meanwhile, towards nationalist Spain, from Germany and Italy flowed thousands of trained soldiers, masses of artillery, aircraft and supplies. In spring 1938, a massive nationalist advance threw the Republicans into retreat.
It was real chaos. They'd broken through in a dozen places. And I was with a first aid man, a tiny Holland, a fellow from Chicago. He always told me he was a gangster. He was a nice fella. Anyway, Tiny and I were with these group of stragglers. Tanks came up and it played hell with the stragglers, half a dozen wounded, 4 or 5 of them killed. And we looked for the rest of the Lincoln Battalion and what was left of the stragglers, and they'd all gone. So Tiny said to me, always remember, he said, if we don't get the hell out from here quickly, those sons of bitches will kill us. So we got up and we run like the clappers.
We were told to get back on the road, march forward. and we run into these tanks.
Wally had gone up to an officer who was with the tanks. In his terrible Spanish, he said, "I'm the commissar of the British battalion. Can you tell me where the headquarters of the 15th Brigade are?"
Apparently, instead of being on our side, it was the fascists.
And the man looked at him and jumped into the tank, and then the tanks opened fire on them. And Wally was killed outright then.
Out of a battalion of about 650, there was about 90 left. And we were formed up on the head of a pass which runs down into the Ebro. And we were told to hold it to fight a rearguard action all day.
And we got to the banks of the Ebro, and we could see there was troops the other side, but in the distance. And how the hell did they get across? How can we get across?
I was lucky I managed to get on a boat.
So we didn't know what to do, but the gunfire now, the tanks were coming, and we could hear the bullets whizzing over. So the decision was made, decision time come, what do we do? Do we stay, get captured or killed, or do we make a dash, sink or swim? So we said, okay, there's no alternative, we got to go. No bridge to cross, no boat. So we all went into the river.
Quite a number tried to swim. The currents there are very difficult. I imagine quite a few were probably drowned.
4 of us got across, 2 were swept away down the river, and 1 waded back. I don't know what happened to him. But 4 of us got across safe.
Gathering momentum as they pushed eastwards, the nationalists reached the Mediterranean, cutting the Republic in 2. Northeastern Catalonia and Barcelona were now isolated from Madrid and the rest of Republican Spain. Secure for the present behind the natural barrier of the River Ebro, the Republican command began to prepare a great offensive, its main aim to reunite the 2 sections of the Republic.